The story of the Enfield Poltergeist is one of the most famous and controversial paranormal cases in history. It has been called everything from an elaborate hoax to undeniable proof of supernatural activity. But what actually happened in that quiet North London home back in the late 1970s? Let's dive into the chilling tale of the Hodgson family, the investigators, and the strange events that still leave people arguing to this day. Our story begins in August of 1977. Peggy Hodgson, a single mother of 4, was living with her children in a modest council house at 284 Green Street in the town of Enfield, north of London. Her children were Margaret, aged 12, Janet, aged 11, Johnny, aged 10, and Billy, aged 7. Life for the family was far from easy. Peggy had recently separated from her husband, and money was tight. But soon, financial struggles would be the least of their worries. It all started with strange noises. At first, it seemed harmless. Little knocks and taps on the walls, odd rustlings in the rooms. Peggy assumed it was the kids fooling around, or maybe some issue with the old pipes of the house. But then the activity escalated. One night, Janet and Margaret reported that their beds were shaking violently. Objects began to move on their own. Furniture shifted without explanation, and soon the entire household was thrown into chaos. On the night of August 30th, things took a terrifying turn. Janet and Margaret screamed for their mother, claiming that their chest of drawers was moving across the bedroom floor all by itself. Peggy rushed in and saw it with her own eyes. The heavy piece of furniture was sliding toward the girls, as if an invisible force was trying to trap them inside the room. When Peggy tried to push it back into place, it resisted with unnatural strength, as if someone, or something, was pushing against her. That was the moment Peggy knew something very strange was happening. In a panic, Peggy gathered her children and ran next door to her neighbors, the Nottinghams. Vic and Peggy Nottingham came over to help. At first, they thought it might be a prank, but soon they too heard the loud knocks coming from the walls. They realized something beyond their understanding was going on. With no idea what else to do, they called the police. When officers arrived, they didn't expect to find anything unusual. But to their shock, they witnessed phenomena themselves. Constable Carolyn Heaps later testified that she saw a chair slide several feet across the floor without anyone touching it. She inspected it for wires, magnets, or any trickery, but found nothing. Still, as police officers, there was little they could do. They couldn't arrest a ghost. So they simply wrote up a report and left the Hodgsons to deal with it. Desperate, Peggy turned to the press. Soon, the Daily Mirror newspaper sent reporters to cover the strange story. At first, the journalists found nothing unusual. But then, in the middle of the night, they were startled when toys suddenly flew across the room, seemingly hurled by unseen hands. A photographer named Maurice claimed he was actually hit in the face by a Lego brick that had materialized out of nowhere. The press coverage brought the case to the attention of the Society for Psychical Research, an organization dedicated to investigating paranormal events. Enter Maurice Grosse and Lyon Playfair, 2 researchers from the society. They became deeply involved in the case and would spend the next 2 years investigating. What they reported was extraordinary. According to Grosse and Playfair, the activity was relentless. Furniture levitated, toys flew, and objects appeared and disappeared at will. The family would hear knocking sounds that seemed to answer questions, almost like a crude form of communication. But the strangest phenomenon was the voice. At times, Janet, the 11-year-old daughter, would speak in a deep, gravelly tone, completely unlike her own. The voice claimed to belong to various entities, one of which identified itself as Bill, a man who said he had died in the house years earlier. The voice was said to continue for hours, with Janet barely moving her lips, as though something else was speaking through her. Investigators even recorded dozens of tapes of these bizarre vocal sessions. Skeptics, of course, had their doubts. Many believed that Janet was simply faking the voice, perhaps using a form of ventriloquism. However, speech experts who studied the recordings suggested that the voice was produced using the false vocal cords, something very difficult for a child to sustain without damaging her throat. Yet Janet seemed able to do it for long periods without harm. Photographic evidence also became a key part of the case. The most famous images show Janet being thrown from her bed, captured mid-air as if levitating. Skeptics argue that she was simply jumping, but supporters claim the positions of her body don't match natural jumping movements. For the Hodgson family, though, whether or not outsiders believed them, the terror was very real. Over the months, the disturbances only grew worse. Neighbors reported hearing strange noises. Furniture continued to move. Fires even broke out spontaneously. Janet was repeatedly the focus of the activity, often going into violent trances. At one point, she was reportedly found levitating and even transported across the room. Another time, curtains were said to wrap themselves around her neck, nearly strangling her. The family endured this torment for nearly 2 years. During this time, investigators recorded more than 2,000 incidents of unexplained phenomena. The case became a media sensation, debated endlessly in newspapers and on television. Paranormal enthusiasts declared it proof of the supernatural. Skeptics accused the family of lying for attention or financial gain. One of the most compelling moments came when the mysterious Bill voice revealed personal details that the Hodgsons supposedly could not have known. He described how he had died of a hemorrhage in a chair in the very house they lived in. Years later, the family of a man named Bill Wilkins came forward, claiming the details matched his real death in that property. This revelation gave chilling weight to the idea that something genuine might be happening. Yet doubts never went away. Even the investigators admitted that the children sometimes exaggerated events or played tricks. On one occasion, Maurice Grosse caught Janet bending spoons and hiding his tape recorder. When confronted, she admitted she sometimes faked things to see if anyone would notice, but she insisted that not everything was a hoax, that most of what happened was real and beyond her control. The case wound down by 1979. The activity eventually faded, though some reports continued into the 1980s. The Hodgson family slowly returned to normal life, though Janet later said she never fully escaped the trauma of those years. In interviews as an adult, she maintained that the haunting was real, though she admitted to occasional trickery under pressure. Margaret, her sister, also supported her claims, insisting that what they experienced was genuine. So where does that leave us? Was the Enfield Poltergeist a genuine haunting, or a mixture of paranormal events and childish mischief amplified by media hysteria? Critics argue that the entire case was built on exaggeration, with gullible investigators falling victim to clever tricks. Supporters point out the sheer volume of testimony, including police officers, journalists, and neighbors who had no reason to lie. What makes the Enfield case so enduring is that it's not black and white. It's messy, complicated, and human. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Moments of unexplainable activity mixed with hoaxes from frightened children desperate for control. Whether it was a haunting, a poltergeist, or simply the stresses of a broken family manifesting in strange ways, the story has left an indelible mark on paranormal history. The case has since inspired books, documentaries, and even movies. Most famously, It was dramatized in the film The Conjuring 2, where Ed and Lorraine Warren, the American paranormal investigators, were portrayed as major players in the case. In reality, their involvement was far more limited. But Hollywood never lets facts get in the way of a good scare. To this day, the Enfield Poltergeist remains one of the most studied paranormal cases in the world. Believers point to the recordings, the testimony, and the sheer number of witnesses as proof that something supernatural really did happen. Skeptics point to the inconsistencies, the admissions of fakery, and the psychological pressures on the family as evidence of a hoax. But one thing is undeniable. For 2 years, in a small house in Enfield, something extraordinary terrified a family and captured the imagination of millions. Whether it was the restless spirit of a dead man, the psychic energy of troubled children, or just a very elaborate hoax, we may never truly know. What we do know is that the Hodgson family lived through an experience that changed their lives forever. And for the rest of us, it gave a ghost story that refuses to die. So next time you hear a bump in the night, or a knock on the wall when you're sure no one's there, remember the Hodgsons and ask yourself, is it just the house settling, or could it be something far stranger?